It was the kind of gift that would have made me cry if it had come a few months earlier. But by the time I received it, my husband was already buried. His things had been delivered in a neatly packed box by the funeral home, a few books, his reading glasses, a weathered wallet with a photograph of us inside, and a velvet box. I opened it expecting something ordinary. But inside was a vintage wristwatch, polished, heavy, unmistakably intentional. It wasn't his style. He never wore watches. I almost thought it was a mistake, until I lifted the lid and saw a note taped to the inside of the case. The handwriting was unmistakable. His. Sharp strokes, carefully formed. The note was short. Forgive me. Look inside. Start with the back. I stared at it for a long time. I should have laughed, maybe even cried. But instead, I just felt cold. Because there was nothing romantic about it. No, I'll love you forever. No soft farewell. Just those 4 words, like a breadcrumb at the edge of something he knew would hurt. I turned the watch over in my hand. It was old, but well maintained. On the back was a barely visible seam along the metal. A removable plate. I fetched a glasses repair tool from the drawer and gently pried it open. A soft click. Then it popped free. Inside, folded tightly, was a slip of paper. Faded around the edges. I unfolded it carefully, hands trembling without realizing. It was an address. A street across town. Nothing special. Just a line of old houses near the edge of the riverbank. And below it, a date, 2 years ago. No names. No explanation. I sat back in my chair and stared at the note again. I knew what this was. Not the whole of it, not yet, but enough to know it wasn't good. My husband hadn't been a mystery. Or so I thought. We'd been married for 17 years. We fought, we reconciled, we made Sunday coffee like clockwork. He had his flaws, distant, sometimes evasive, but I never suspected anything beyond the usual quiet silences of a long marriage. But this? This wasn't the silence I knew. This was deliberate. He'd left me a path. Not a goodbye, not closure, but a beginning. A door he knew I'd eventually open, whether out of grief or obligation or just the gnawing instinct that comes when something inside you starts to feel rewritten. The next morning, I drove to the address. The neighborhood was older, quiet, sun-dappled in that suburban kind of way. The house was modest. Blue shutters, a swing on the porch. I sat in the car for a long time before stepping out. Every step toward the door felt heavier than the last. I knocked once. A moment later, it opened. The woman who stood there looked to be in her late 40s. Neat hair, tired eyes. She blinked at me. At first, confusion. Then something else, recognition. "Can I help you?" she asked, voice neutral. I think I'm looking for someone," I said slowly. I was married to David Grant. He passed away last month. Something shifted in her face. Not surprise. Not shock. Just a stillness, like she'd been bracing for this exact moment. "I know who you are," she said. And then, quietly, she stepped aside. "Come in." I didn't speak. I didn't move for a second. But I knew. I knew before I crossed the threshold, before I saw the framed photos on her mantel, before she told me anything. The watch hadn't been a gift. It was a door. And I had just walked through it. The living room smelled like lavender and dust. Not unpleasant, just lived in, like the kind of place someone builds slowly over years, not months. I stood there, still by the door, watching her walk toward the kitchen. She didn't ask again if I wanted to come in. She simply assumed I would. And I did. Because the moment I saw the photo on the hallway table, my husband smiling, arm around her, in a backyard I didn't recognize, I knew I couldn't leave. Not yet. She returned with tea. 2 mugs. Sat down across from me like we were about to have a conversation no one ever wants to start. There was no accusation in her posture, no defensiveness. Just a strange kind of sadness, calm and heavy. "I'm Elise," she said, finally. "You're Emily." It wasn't a question. "Yes," I said quietly. "I figured. Eventually." "How long?" I started, but the words got stuck. 13 years, she said before I could finish. "I met him when he said he was divorced." "He never mentioned you." "Ever." My hand went slack around the cup. "He told you he wasn't married?" She nodded slowly. "I found out 3 years ago. By accident. An old card fell out of his bag. Your name was on it." I confronted him. He didn't deny it. Just said he didn't want to hurt anyone. I laughed, but it wasn't funny. It was sharp, bitter. Too late. She winced a little, but not from guilt, from recognition. She wasn't the enemy. She was just as fooled. "I told him to leave," she continued. He didn't. But things changed. He started coming around less. Said work got in the way. Said his health was failing. I didn't know he died until a few days ago. There was a pause. Long, filled with the sound of the clock ticking over the fireplace. "He left me a note too," she said eventually. I looked up. Nothing dramatic. Just a letter, short. Said everything I needed to know was with you. My mouth went dry. "He left you, for me to find?" She shook her head. "No. He left you a thread. I think he wanted us both to pull it." I didn't want to cry, but I felt it building. Not because of her. Not because of the betrayal. But because I realized this wasn't just about love. It was about everything he had built, split, hidden, compartmentalized until the truth no longer had edges. And now, the man who had written both our names into separate lives had passed the mess back to us, piece by piece. "Did you two have children?" I asked, not even sure what I was ready to hear. She hesitated. Then nodded. "One. His name is Noah. He's 10. I closed my eyes. I had always wanted children. David had said he wasn't ready. Said he couldn't. I thought it was a wound we shared. But now I knew it was just a door he had closed, with me, and left open somewhere else. She saw it in my face. That quiet, sudden realization that shifts your whole sense of memory. She didn't offer comfort. She just sat there, present, letting me unravel in my own time. "I don't know why he did it this way," she said after a while. "But I think he was trying to fix something before it was too late." I looked at the note again. The faded address. The old date. No, he hadn't been trying to fix anything. He had known exactly what he was doing. He just didn't have the courage to do it while he was alive. And now, he'd left the burden to us, 2 women who never asked for this story, now holding both ends of it with trembling hands. After that first meeting, I told myself I wouldn't go back. I told myself I had seen enough. The betrayal had a shape now, a face, a name. There was no more room for denial, and yet, somehow, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Not just the woman. Not just the boy. But everything that must have existed between them and him, all while I thought I had the whole picture. 2 days later, I found myself driving back. I didn't call. I just showed up. And when Elise opened the door, she didn't look surprised. Just tired. But she let me in again. This time, there was no tea. No polite talk. She led me into a small study off the main hall. Neat shelves. Photos lined up perfectly. And on the desk, a wooden box. She opened it and pushed it toward me. "These are his letters," she said. From over the years. Most were short. Some were sweet. But there's one you should read first. I pulled it out gently. The envelope was yellowed at the corners, dated 3 years ago, around the time she said she discovered the truth. Inside was a 3-page letter. No greeting. No dear Elise. Just straight into it. He admitted everything. That he had been married for over a decade before he met her. That he had told himself he would leave me but never did. That by the time he had built something real with her, built Noah, it had become impossible to untangle without destroying everyone. He called it a quiet prison. One he built himself. Then stayed in. But what broke me wasn't the lie. It was the part where he described our Sunday mornings. Me bringing him coffee. Him pretending he wasn't thinking about whether she'd notice he was gone longer than usual. He had layered our lives like wallpaper. One on top of the other. Neat. Clean. Hidden under paint and time. I didn't speak for a long while. Just flipped through letter after letter. And then I found the photographs. Noah looked like him. It was unmistakable. Same eyes. Same eyebrows when he frowned. Same smile, crooked on the left. My breath caught. He's a good boy, Elise said quietly. Loves music. He thinks his father was a traveling consultant. He doesn't know all of this. I nodded. Because what else could I say? I wasn't here to rip that away from him. I was here because a man I thought I knew had split his life clean down the center and buried the blade between 2 women who had never agreed to share. And then Elise said something that stopped me cold. There was another document. A letter, maybe even a will. He wrote it 6 months before he died. He said he wanted to make things right. I looked up, suddenly sharp. What happened to it? I never saw it. He said he hadn't filed it yet. Said he wasn't ready. But he promised he'd give it to someone when the time came. Someone? She nodded. He said, when I'm gone, Emily will know what to do. I thought that meant you'd show up with it. But you didn't. So either he never finished it, or he hid it. The air thickened in the room. I had gone from widow to stranger, and now, suddenly, I was becoming a custodian of a truth I hadn't even asked for. What kind of man hides a second family? The same kind who hides a second will. And the only thing more painful than realizing you were betrayed is realizing that, even in death, your name is tied to someone else's silence. I went home that night in a silence so complete it felt like grief had swallowed the walls. The kind of silence you don't fill with music or television, because it would feel dishonest, like trying to wallpaper over a cracked foundation. I sat in his office for hours. The same room I used to dust every Saturday. The one he kept neat, minimal. It used to seem responsible. Now, it felt curated. Like someone had been careful about what not to leave behind. I pulled down every book from the shelves. Checked for false backs, hidden pockets. Nothing. I opened every drawer. Rummaged through every file folder. Receipts. Tax documents. Retirement plans. Neatly arranged, just as he always kept them. But sterile. Like a life lived without story. It wasn't until I opened the old roll-top desk in the corner that I saw it. A worn hardback, tucked behind a stack of magazines. Collected speeches of Lincoln. The kind of book David would never actually read, he wasn't interested in politics or history. I pulled it free, flipped it open. Nothing unusual. I thumbed through a few more pages, then something caught my eye. Page 146 felt heavier. I looked closer. 2 pages were fused at the edge. Glued. I ran my thumb gently down the seam, then carefully peeled them apart. Inside was a folded document. My hands went cold. I opened it slowly, breath shallow. The top read, Addendum to Last Will and Testament, David R. Grant. It was dated 6 months before his death. Signed. Notarized. And it changed everything. It acknowledged both families. Named Elise and Noah directly. It split his estate into three, 1/3 to me, 1/3 to Elise, 1/3 placed into a trust for Noah. It detailed the ownership of assets, and made provisions for the education fund he had always said we couldn't afford to set up. There was a letter, too. Not legal, just personal. He wrote that he never had the courage to reconcile the two halves of his life while he was alive. That he had loved us both differently, but deeply. That he wanted, in death, to stop the harm from multiplying. And he had left it with the only person he believed would do the right thing, even if it meant tearing open old wounds. Me. He had hidden the truth, and left me the truth. I sat there in the dim light for a long time. Just staring. The betrayal hadn't softened, but something else crept in, a kind of burdened clarity. He hadn't trusted anyone else with this. Maybe because he knew no one else would carry it without rage. Or revenge. I thought about Elise. About Noah. About a boy who had done nothing wrong, and a woman who had already endured the shame of being hidden. Then I thought about how my husband had gone to his grave with clean hands in public, but left all the blood behind for me to wipe up. The next morning, I contacted a probate attorney. Not the one who handled David's original will. Someone independent. Objective. I handed over the document. I told her everything. She studied it for a long while before speaking. "This is legitimate," she said. "And if we submit it, it will override the prior filing." I nodded. "Do you want to move forward?" I took a breath. "This isn't just about what he left behind," I said. "It's about what he tried to bury. I'm not letting him take that with him." And just like that, I signed the declaration to submit the hidden will. It was never about the money. It was about the truth finally having somewhere to live, on paper, in court, and in the eyes of the people who were denied it while he was alive. The courthouse didn't feel like a place for closure. Just a building with long lines, old floors, and people carrying boxes of their pasts, hoping someone in a robe would make sense of them. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't angry. I was just steady. Like something inside had finally stopped spinning. All the rage and disbelief had already burned out. What was left now was resolve. My attorney, Clara, walked beside me. She had read the hidden will twice, quietly, without judgment. She didn't ask me why I was doing this. She just saw the signature, the notary stamp, and the date, and understood what it meant. David's original will left everything to me. No mention of Elise. No trust for Noah. Just a clean, traditional division, spouse inherits, end of story. That's what his brother, the executor of the first will, expected. That's what Elise had quietly mourned as a final slight. That's what everyone else thought was settled. But David had written a new ending. And now it was time to file it. Inside the courtroom, Elise sat in the second row, behind the bar. She didn't look at me at first, and I didn't turn around. We weren't there to comfort each other. We were there because neither of us had been given the dignity of a full truth until now. She was dressed simply. Noah wasn't there, too young, too confusing. That was the right call. When David's brother stood, he looked shocked. "This isn't what David wanted," he said to the judge. "He never mentioned another will. Never brought it to my office." My lawyer stood calmly. "That may be true," Clara replied. "But the decedent signed and notarized a legal addendum. Whether he filed it with his brother or not is irrelevant. He intended it. He signed it. And he left it with his spouse, Emily, along with personal instructions. He knew what he was doing." The judge read every page. The courtroom felt suspended in slow motion. Every breath, every cough, every shuffle of paper sounded like thunder in the quiet. And then, the judge spoke. I find the submitted addendum to be legitimate. It meets the requirements of probate law in this state. It is specific in its directives and bears no sign of coercion or fraud. The estate will be divided as outlined in this updated document. There it was. No gavel. No gasp. Just a statement, plain and final. I felt nothing at first. No victory. No satisfaction. Just a quiet ache, like watching someone you once loved disappear all over again, but this time without lies. Elise glanced at me then. Not with triumph. Just recognition. A flicker of something between apology and gratitude. Not spoken, not necessary. We had both been wronged, but neither of us had turned bitter. And maybe that was what he had gambled on, one of us being strong enough to clean up what he couldn't bring himself to face. David's brother stood frozen, stunned by the court's decision. But he didn't contest it. He just gathered his notes and walked out, carrying a version of the man he thought he knew, one that had now crumbled in front of him. After the hearing, Elise and I stood outside on the courthouse steps. The sky was gray but dry. No small talk. Just a long silence. He left us a mess, I said finally. She nodded. But at least now it's all above ground. I handed her a copy of the trust papers for Noah. You'll be the primary custodian, I said. It's all set up. Elise looked down at the papers, then back at me. He picked the wrong way to live, she said. But maybe he picked the right person to fix it. I didn't reply. Because I wasn't doing it for him. I was doing it so no one else would ever have to carry a lie with his name on it again. The house felt different now. Not haunted, not angry, just quieter. As if the secrets had finally stepped out from under the floorboards and left with the last autumn breeze. I no longer looked over my shoulder expecting to see David walk into the kitchen, offer his tired smile, ask for coffee like nothing had changed. That illusion had dissolved somewhere between court dates and buried letters. I still wore the watch. Not because I forgave him. Not because I wanted to remember. But because it reminded me of who I became when everything fell apart, and how I chose to respond. People think betrayal makes you smaller. Makes you vengeful. But what no one talks about is the space it opens. The silence it creates. And in that silence, you get to choose. Whether to carry the wound like a sword, or like a scalpel, cutting cleanly towards something new. The estate was split. The trust for Noah was fully active, with Elise named as the guardian until he turned 18. The education fund was real. And for the first time, I saw that boy's life not as evidence of my husband's lie, but as proof that someone else deserved better than what David gave either of us. I didn't stay in contact with Elise. That was a boundary we both respected. We didn't need to be friends. We didn't need holiday cards. We just needed peace. And I think, in some way, we both found it, not in each other, but in the simple act of acknowledging the whole truth, without tearing each other apart. There were moments, still, when the grief came in strange ways. A commercial with music David used to hum. An empty chair at a dinner party. The scent of his cologne when I opened the last drawer he used. But the grief that once felt sharp had become rounder. Softer. Like a pebble I kept in my pocket, not gone, but no longer cutting into me. One afternoon, I sat in the garden and opened the last letter he had written. The one that came with the will. I'd read it before, but this time, I read it slower. He said he had been afraid. Not of me. Not of Elise. But of being seen all at once. He had lived his life like a man standing between two mirrors, each reflecting something different. And eventually, he stopped knowing which reflection was real. I never meant to make you carry this, he wrote. But if you're reading this, it means you did. And I'm sorry. I hope what I left you can be more than just a burden. I hope it helps someone. It didn't help me. Not in the way he meant. But it did something better, it clarified me. It reminded me that love, at its best, is not about how well someone hides their flaws. It's about what you do when the mask falls. Do you run? Do you destroy everything out of pain? Or do you build something steadier, brick by brick, from the wreckage? I chose to build. Not because he deserved it. But because I did. And so did that child. The past didn't need to be rewritten. It just needed to be revealed, completely, painfully, honestly, so the rest of us could finally step forward without shadows. David didn't get to be the man he pretended to be. But I became the woman he never saw coming. And I did it not with rage, but with truth, and silence, and a watch that once told time and now tells a story. One he didn't finish. So I did.